excited to talk to you about this as well. Like Dr. Laura said, this is the thing that we're seeing. Communication struggles has been one of the main topics we see come through the door that is problematic. So I think we all entered the COVID pandemic with this expectation that we were going to, have happy moments together, smile like this family on our screen, smiling, eating dinner together, and just becoming closer together. But the reality, which you'll see on the next page, has been far different. And one of the statements that I've heard the most over this past year is, Christina, I don't know what happened. We used to all get along. We used to love spending time with each other. And now I feel like I can't even be in the same room with my family. And I don't know how many of you have had a similar experience. I know there's been occasions, even in my family, we've had that. But this change is coming because our bodies and our brains are just stressed out. And stress is a normal response to change, including change that comes from a crisis situation like the pandemic. So stress is coming in it, and our body is reacting with the physiological response of fight, flight, or freeze. Fight meaning aggression and anger, and including even violence. And flight is the running away, both physically and emotionally. And freeze is where you just completely shut down. I think all of us have experienced seeing someone, they're there physically, but you're just not seeing that. And if you want to forward to the next screen, Kamala, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And I want to give you an example of fight, flight, or freeze happening in a stressful situation. So I think this happened at the last school year when our kids were still taking buses to and from school. I went to go meet my son at the bus stop, and the bus came and kids got off the bus, and I looked for my son and he wasn't there. And I asked the bus driver if my son was still on the bus, to which she replied, nope, he's not there. And in that moment, all I could think of was, what do you mean he's not on the bus? And I know she said something to me and asked me questions, but all I could say and keep saying and keep thinking was, what do you mean he's not on the bus? One of the other moms started to talk to the bus driver to help me and told me to call my husband, and I called him and told him that our son wasn't on the bus, and I don't know why he's not on the bus, but I was frozen and I wasn't coming out of it at all. Luckily, this other mom started working with the bus driver to call the school, and my husband told me to stay there and he would call the after-school program, and my son was found right away. But I could not do anything in that moment because I was in fight, flight, or freeze. And they were able to help me because they were able to stay calm and present. So chronic stress and a stressful moment like my story are different, but they have a lot of similarities. The fight, flight, or freeze response is still there in chronic stress, but we may not recognize it because it's almost nonstop, and it becomes part of us. In a relationship, this can become a big divider because we think, oh, we're doing okay. It's just the rest of them that are acting crazy and out of character, right? See, what happens is that all the constant stress and fear that comes with uncertainty and unpredictability of a crisis situation that affects every aspect of our life, from how we're doing school to how we're doing work to how we even grocery shop, has changed. And with this constant change comes a lack of control. And this lack of control pushes us to try and create some sort of control in our lives. So we then, problem solve and begin to try to over control the things around us, whether it's our work, whether it's over controlling our communication with our family, whether it's even over controlling our family. It's micromanaging to an extreme. But guess what? Over controlling doesn't work. And no one likes to be micromanaged, especially in a family. So this then leads to feelings of anger and contempt and hostility, hoping that the fear we are creating will finally give us some sort of control and we can get our family to comply. But as you can imagine, this starts pushing families further apart. And if you look at the statistics, the rate of domestic violence is surging. The rate of divorce is at an all-time high. Alcohol and addiction cases, as well as relapse cases, have increased dramatically. And and also concerning is the number of kids going to their doctor's office or the ER for psychiatric emergencies have made it hard to find services where services used to be underutilized.
Mm-hmm.
So luckily there is something we can do. We can take care of ourselves. And when we recognize that we're stressed out and the people around us are stressed out, we can take things slower and we can breathe through them, and we can begin to approach each other with kindness and empathy and compassion and accepting that things are hard right now. So here's another story of a very stressful moment in my life. But in this case, I was able to stay present and not go into freeze mode. A couple years back, I was working at a mental health center in New Mexico, and I worked with kids with really traumatic histories. One day, one of my kiddos who struggled with a history of trauma and abuse was having an extremely tough day. And on that day, she ended up bringing a knife with her and pulled that knife in the office and threatened to kill herself. In that moment, you can imagine that if I froze, if I shut down like I did when my son wasn't on the bus, it could have turned into an extremely horrific event. But luckily, I pulled on all the skills I had learned, making sure to stay calm and to stay grounded, to stay present for this child, and offer as much love and compassion that I could to a child who is in so much pain. And by doing so, she was able to see that she wasn't alone, and she was able to give me the knife, and I was able to give her the help that she really needed. Now, I had an advantage, of course, because I know to be prepared for situations like this in my job, in my workplace. But we can also be prepared in our daily lives to meet our own and our family needs. And by meeting our own and our family's need, we have the ability to let crisis bring us closer together and have deeper conversations and feel more deeply connected. So, before I move into what healthy family communication looks like, I'm going to take a quick detour to some basic developmental tasks our teens should be learning in regards to communication. And if you want to move the slide forward one, that would be great. The reason why I want to do this is that the isolation of this pandemic has pressed a pause button on these developmental tasks, which in return creates a barrier for healthy family communication. I think we all know that during teen years, they are biologically driven to pull away from their parents and begin to spend most of their time and energy with their peers. This time and energy is helping to shape how they're going to be in relationship in the future. And the basis of relationship is communication. So during this crucial time, teens are learning the give and take of spoken conversation, and they become curious about more than just themselves. They're learning about how talking about the self affects those that they care about. They are using their curiosity to try to understand and find similarities with their friends and the people they are drawn to in order to create deeper, longer lasting connections. They are learning how to set boundaries and accept boundaries. And even more practically, they're learning and trying to understand body language and understanding contextual cues of conversations. They begin to really see and understand how their words affect others so that if what they're saying seems to be causing distress in a friend, they can quickly pivot and meet the needs of their friend. But with so many our teens in isolation and not around their peers on a daily basis, they're losing out on these important lessons. And we, as caregivers, as parents, we look at our kids and don't understand why their communication skills look so much like their middle school or even elementary school self. On top of this, there's social media where teens are engaging in most of their communication. And you can go ahead one more slide. So prior to the pandemic, we had statistics that showed that 97% of our teens were on social media platform, that 51% visit social media sites at least once a day, and that 45% of our teens are online almost constantly. Um, it showed that their average teen was online, not including homework, 9 hours a day. And what we're seeing now is that number is increasing astronomically because of the loneliness and the isolation that our kiddos are feeling. Well, I'm not here to talk about the pros and cons of teen use of social media, but I think it's important to be aware of these numbers because when we go back and look at the developmental tasks around communication, teens may feel like they are still interacting with other teens in healthy ways, but they're not. Because on social media, the focus is on the self, not our friends. And you're not learning to understand body language and you aren't learning contextual cues because pictures and text online are so edited and so manipulated, you aren't seeing how your words are affecting the other person. And because you don't see their reaction in real time, you're not seeing, again, that your words are really affecting the other person. So, as parents and caregivers, or even just as adults that influence teens, help them understand what they're missing so that they can be intentional in their learning. So, now let's look at what healthy family communication can look like, and then I'll pass this presentation on to Dr. Laura. The very first step in creating healthy family communication is to have a healthy foundation of wellness. This means focusing as a family on how we're eating and what we're putting into our bodies, on the amount of sleep that we're getting. I just read an article that said one of the worst effects of the pandemic is the sleep deprivation. And sleep deprivation just does a number of bad things to us as human beings. And so putting a focus on sleep and sleep hygiene is more important now than ever. And of course, with any health topic, we have to look at our moving our bodies or exercise. We need to be moving our body at least 30 minutes a day. And this can be anything from going on a 30-minute walk to doing stretches for 30 minutes. Or in our family, we find fun videos on YouTube, whether it's yoga or Zumba, and you can dance around as a family and have fun or do it individually. This healthy foundation that you're creating is helping your body prepare for the incoming stress of any kind of crisis or trauma. So again, whether it's this pandemic or some event in the future, you're ready and you're prepared. The second part of creating healthy family communication is to understand you and your family's crisis mode. In going back to the fight, flight, or freeze, which one do you see yourself as? Which one do you see your spouse, your partner? Which one do you see most in your kids? Maybe you even see it in your boss at work. Knowing this will help you recognize it. And as I said before, if you can recognize it, you can help yourself and your family through the physiological process of crisis. So help them breathe, help them make sense of what is happening, and give them patience and kindness and love. Third, when talks escalate, take a break. Please take a break. So often with the families and couples that I see, I hear over and over again, when we start a conversation, we need to finish it. But this is the worst advice. This is the worst thing that you can do. And oftentimes it's a lot more harmful. When we are escalated, we are letting our emotions talk for us, and our emotions do not allow for any listening. Escalated arguments do so much damage to our anger. Hurt and frustration and even sadness, they make us say things that we deeply, deeply regret. Instead, if you take a break and focus on calming your body and calming your mind before re-entering the conversation, you're more likely to come to the conversation with a new problem-solving attitude. So if you feel an escalation, take a break, find a time you're willing to come back and talk about it, but allow yourself and your family to press that pause button on intense conversations. Mm-hmm. Number 4, and this kind of goes along with the last one, is schedule times to talk and check in. This can be just like a business meeting at work. You're more prepared to go into a business meeting when you know what the goal is, who the people are going to be at the meeting, and what the mindset you need for the problem solving or creative session that you're about to have. It's the same thing with our families. And when we have family meetings, we know we need to stay present. We know we need to stay focused, and that we're coming together to work as a family and this will create a setup for success in these family moments. So whether it's a family dinner or a game night, set a time to really check in with your family and talk about the state of the family. And last but not least, listen and show curiosity. Many kids and teens, I can tell you, they know what you're going to say. They've heard all your lectures and they tell them to me verbatim in my office. I sit there and I hear the lectures. They have so much to contribute. excuse me, they have so much that they can contribute, and there's so much they're trying to make sense of in this world that, and they do want input from you if they feel seen and heard by you. And from that feeling of seen and heard, they will feel connected and close to you. And as an added bonus, when this happens, they're more likely to come to you and ask you for help because they know you're not going to say something they already know. So listening is crucial with our kiddos. When this happens, you'll find that communication with them will drastically change and feel much healthier and more productive. So now I'm going to switch this over to Dr. Laura.
Thanks, Christina. And thank you for talking about the healthy communication. It's so important, especially as parents or guardians. Our primary job is to help mold our kids into a kind, respectful, honest, and caring individual, and to be able to have those healthy communications with the family and with others. To be able to help them become that person, though, we need to know ourselves. We need to be willing to look at ourselves in all the ways that we're looking at our kids. We need to look at our behaviors, our attitudes, and beliefs. And one of the most influential ways our kids learn is by watching us. They probably watch us more than we really want them to. But according to the social learning theory, people learn by watching others, and children watch and learn from the parents and guardians beyond what we could imagine. So let's just take a moment and think about something we have, think, believe, or do because we watched or heard our parents. And we ended up emulating them without really having any discussion about it, or understand the benefits or consequences, or really anything about it. So some of the responses I got from others when doing this presentation in person, where people had the opportunity to speak, some of their answers were smoking. Some just smoked because parents smoked. Some are vegetarians because their parents are vegetarians. Somebody bought certain type of dishes because mom bought those type of dishes. Some go to the same vacation their parents went and never go outside of that. And how many of us purchase foods that our parents have purchased? And I can tell you, I did not know ketchup came sugarless until quite recently, because I just pulled the Heinz ketchup off the shelf and never really thought about it until I was trying to live a little healthier. And one other was somebody only bought Ford cars because mom and dad bought Ford cars. And even the choice of our religion or politics, do we really examine that as much as we should? Or do we just kind of fall into things? So an example, you may have heard this story before, but it's a woman who is holding Thanksgiving and she was putting in a ham. And so what she did is she cut off the ends of the ham and put it in the pan, was putting it in the oven. And her husband said, honey, why did you cut off the ends of the ham? And she said, I don't know. That's just what my mom did. So he went over, it was Thanksgiving, so mom was there, and he went over and said, Mom, I just saw that your daughter is cutting off the ends of the ham. Is there something special about that? And she said, no. And he said, well, can you tell me why you did it? And she said, well, because my mom did it. So happened, grandma was there. So he went to grandma and said, Grandma, your daughter and your granddaughter are cutting off the end of the ham. Is there something special? Does it taste different? Like, what's the big deal? She said, oh no, it's just the ham didn't fit in my pan, so I had to cut off the ends of it. That may be an exaggeration, but it is an example how we do things not consciously. We just tend to follow and emulate behaviors, again, that we don't really even make a choice about. So it's helpful when you make conscious choices. And how do we make conscious choices or conscious behaviors? And I'm talking about this because we want to do that if we're wanting our kids to be that child we're wanting to go put out in the world, respectful, honest, caring individual. So, and they're going to watch us. So how do we become conscious of our choices so they can be emulating our good behavior? So we need to be curious. I loved how Christina used the word curious, and want to become aware of those areas that we might need to grow in, especially if we want healthier communication and relationships in our family. But how do we find those growth areas? Like, how would we do that? One, you can be curious and then become aware and be intentional, but the best way is to watch your children. Watch them, and I bet you'll find something that you might want to change. So, for example, in regards to a healthy foundation and for the healthy communication piece, do you as a parent create the foundation of having a healthy nutrition meal? Do you get enough sleep? Do you create movement for yourself so your kids can see what you're doing? Do they see you eating healthy and sleeping well? Or do they see you on your social media and really not really moving at all? Do you know your crisis mode, whether it's fight, flight, or freeze? Do you know that and what that looks like and what they're seeing and what they'll probably start emulating? Do you know how to take a break when the talks escalate? Or do you keep needing to be right? Do they see you, again, kind of backing off? Do you schedule the time to talk with your spouse or partner to check in? Do your kids see that it's just a part of normal communication for people you care about to check in and see how your day was? And with that, do they see you being a good listener? And I smile because there's a whole practice out there called a counseling field that is created because people don't listen well and people want to be heard. So how good are you at listening, and what are the kids' experience? And do you as a parent show curiosity to your spouse or partner and to your kids? What do they see? Do they see you asking those curious questions and really wanting to know about their day? So to kind of sum that up, don't expect your kids to do something that you are not. You may do a great job at most of these, and that is wonderful. There may be a few you may want to look at, and you may, again, want to allow yourself to evaluate, your behaviors and words, and again, learn from your kids. So for example, if your kid is not a good listener, don't assess yourself and ask, or please assess yourself and ask, what is it about me that created that? It's a lot harder to look at yourself than to blame the child. And you need to look at, when you're looking at and assessing, assess the action, not the person. Don't assess you or the child. Look at the action that needs to be changed. And by looking at how you're listening is one way to assess, but also ask people that you trust and that will be honest with you to help you assess, and ask with a desire of wanting to learn and grow. This assessment of oneself can be done with healthy family communication or any behavior that you're looking at and wanting to change or you're not liking and wanting to change. It's allowing yourself to assess yourself, and again, a true desire to wanting to be healthier. And I think most of us want that. But again, it's really having to be aware of it to change it. Well, to become curious and assess and to watch your kids' behavior may take some time. So I wanted to give you one thing that you could do that could change an interaction immediately, that you could take tonight. So in the middle of a negative behavior argument, we tend to make it a teachable moment, or we want to try to correct the behavior. We're trying to correct it, and please do not do either one of those. So please do not make it a teachable moment. Do not try to correct any behavior in the state of anger, frustration, or sadness. You want to have a conversation, as Christina brought up, about the issue in a place when you're feeling connected, calm, and with the child that you're going to be talking to. This is what we call footnoting. You want to footnote the conversation in the midst of it. So when you footnote it, it's in the middle of a conflict. Mentally, you're going to give up the need to be right. You're going to mentally footnote it, and then wait till they and you are calm when you're tucking them in bed or when you're having a sweet conversation. And again, just be more curious about what was going on. And I think that you'll find that there'll be a more open and honest communication about it. And this can work with spouses. So that's just a side note. I tend to use it a lot with my husband, that I really don't. Sometimes I have to pause and don't want to say things that I would like to say. and footnote it. And then when it's a quieter time, I can bring it back up in a better state. And he is too. Footnoting is not easy, especially in the middle of the conflict. So you want to be practicing that tool and be really have that just in the front of your mind that you can grab. So to kind of sum my piece up, your child's development hangs on the balance of your transformation. Let me say that again. Your child's development hangs on the balance of your transformation. So change starts at the top. And there you have it. I love that sign. We're watching with the little ones in the picture.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Bogart and Christine. Is there any questions that we have in the audience? Please feel free to use the chat room or you can use the Q&A to ask any questions. And then Cheryl Lynn, do we have any questions from the audience?
I have a question. There's a question about footnoting. It seems to me like there might be a fine line between footnoting and I can't believe you're bringing this up again. I can't believe you're throwing this in my face again. You know, the other person thinking that the conversation was over and then it being brought up again. How do you balance that?
I think that's where you're very careful with the state of each other. So if you think that there's going to be some kind of reaction to that, or they're still irritable or angry, it's not the time for it. It's when you both are feeling different and calm and at peace. So I wouldn't bring it up if there's any edginess, because I just think you'll get exactly that.
Good question.
Thank
Do we have any other questions tonight for Dr. Bogart or Christine?
Yeah, we've got a question here. What are your thoughts about consequences for teens that act out when they might be in a meltdown situation? Do you wait for the footnote for that? So again, consequences for teens that act out when they're in the middle of a meltdown.
Sure. In the middle of a meltdown, it's the same what Dr. Laura is saying about footnoting. It's take a break. We don't consequence the behavior right then and there, because if they're in meltdown mode, they are way past understanding a consequence, and it's not going to have an impact. And I think the other piece with that is, and what I like to tell parents is, what is the problem that you're trying to solve in the moment? And the problem that you're trying to solve is attending to the needs of whatever is causing the tantrum or this outburst, not the outburst itself. Because if we're concentrating on the outburst itself, we are losing sight of something that the real help that we could be giving. So again, that's a great time to call time out, tell them to walk it off, go to their room, whatever. And when the emotions have calmed down, come back, talk about it. If consequences need to happen, like if your teen threw something, hit something, broke something, a repair is going to happen. But get him or her involved in that problem solving process, and because they will take responsibility if they're heard and seen and figured out why they escalated, why it got so big, and help them through whatever that was. They are much more likely to take responsibility about what happened when their emotions got too big. So generally in the moment, I do not ever recommend consequencing behaviors, but more help them through the emotion and help find a way to create calm so we can actually process what happened.
It's interesting. I usually find that they give tougher consequences for themselves.
They do.
And yeah, it's like
They do.
I know.
Yeah. And interesting, on the stress survey that we just did last fall during the pandemic, what was an interesting tidbit is that students were putting more pressure on themselves than the parents were.
Absolutely.
And so that was an interesting tidbit that came out, is that the students are putting more pressure on themselves.
Yeah. Kids are very good at shame. They're very good at shaming themselves. And, in the moment of a big emotion, shame might not show its head, but as soon as it's over, it's so easy for them to go there and just feel so guilty, so bad about what happened.
Yeah.
Yep. And I also wonder, the parents, how much do they put pressure on themselves? And that's what the kids see.
Yeah.
Right. And the kids are emulating maybe that from their parents.
Yes. And that's the stuff we want to catch.
Yep. Cheryl Lynn, do we have any more questions in the Q&A or the chat room?
Let's see. I don't see any others. If it's a question that you want to be anonymous, you can always direct message Sherilyn. You can send it to me that way. If there are any other questions, I'm getting a couple things in, just saying thank you. It's been very helpful. Great presentation, great conversation. So I'm seeing a couple of those come in. But I'm not seeing any other questions at this time.
Lisa, it's good to see your picture up there.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to then stop sharing the screen. And then we can probably see people.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have this presentation on our website. If any of you would like to view it, or if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Sherilyn, myself, or Dr. Bogart, or Christine Maki. And with that, then, if we don't have any other questions, I will say good night to everybody. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Wonderful. Thanks. And again, the link once again, will be on our website by tomorrow, probably, or maybe Friday. And please share it. If you found this helpful yourself, please feel free to pass the link, pass the word on to friends that maybe didn't get to watch tonight.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a nice
good night.
Thank you, Dr. Bogart. Thank you, Christine Maki.
Our pleasure.
Bye, guys. Thank you. Bye, guys.